I like this. Looks very professional.
Okay, and and that is about as live. That is about as
Yeah,
professional as we get.
as this it is. We don't get any more, and that's all. Somebody's technology has allowed us to look at least that professional. So, hello everyone, and whoever is with us live, and whoever may be watching us through YouTube, I guess, and it's been a while since we've been out here for one of these, and there's actually been no popular outcry asking us to come back, but we're here anyway. As I said, we're going to inflict ourselves on the airway. So, and is Deacon Rick in the shot with us?
He is.
I can see it from where
Oh
I
yeah.
am.
Okay. Good. Because sometimes I don't
Yeah, he's there.
understand how the technology. So for the first time in our live events and our broadcasts, we're going international. So we have a guest from another country here. So and I want to welcome to our broadcast here, Deacon Rick Wells. We'll maybe just allow you to introduce yourself, but you are the Chancellor of the Diocese of St. Petersburg, Florida. And also, I know, and in our conversations together, we in Canada, we can claim a little piece of you because you got your license in canon law at St. Paul's University in Ottawa. So,
Yes.
and welcome, Deacon Rick. And as you see, Deacon Sean has put in the whatever that thing is called underneath there. It says God in the turmoil, because we've had a lot of turmoil recently. And let me tell you about the genesis of how we ended up reaching out to Deacon Rick, because we were talking about, of course, going through the experience of Fiona, which was almost 2 months ago now. That's hard to believe, but and we're still feeling the effects, and you still drive around and see. In fact, just yesterday there was a collection of debris from my front yard, trees and branches and all that kind of stuff. We said, well, what about what are the spiritual, implications of a hurricane, and who could we talk to, or who could talk to us? And we figured, well, who knows more about hurricanes than people in Florida? And through a connection from a priest in our own diocese, Father Bernie McAdam, he put me in touch with Deacon Wood. So, and I know you've mentioned. Why don't you talk about your experience with hurricanes? You actually were not impacted much by Fiona. It took a turn before it got to you.
That's right. That's right.
And
Yeah.
you sent it to us. So, but you've had lots of other experience though, right? With
Absolutely, yes. And just giving you a little bit of background too, I've lived in the state of Florida for 36 years. I actually was born and raised in the state of Ohio. So in place of hurricanes, we had tornadoes.
wow.
The Midwest is well known for that. So I just went from one storm magnet to another. But in the time I've been here, I'd say probably the worst year for storms that I've seen was 2004, because we actually had 4 hurricanes that hit Florida in different areas that year. Probably the worst was Hurricane Charlie, which took almost exactly the same path as Hurricane Ian earlier this year. And I'm sure you've heard the news about that, how it hit to the south of us, although it was predicted to be almost a direct hit on where I'm sitting right here in St. Petersburg, Florida. So we've dodged a bullet many times as a diocese and as a region in Florida. The last direct hit we had here in the Tampa, St. Petersburg area was in 1922. But at the same time, we're not holding our breath, because things can change in a heartbeat, as you and I know very well. The devastation that you had from Fiona, and certainly one of our local priests is familiar with that because one of our retirement actually vacations up in the Diocese of Charlottetown every year. And so he was up there when Fiona had hit and saw the effects on the parish where he was staying at that time. But yeah, over the years, we've seen our share of it and have also had a few near misses. Have seen other areas around us that were absolutely devastated. The panhandle of Florida seems to be another magnet, as does the New Orleans area. So often what we'll find ourselves doing, and it's become more common than not, at least once a year, where our diocese is sending funds to other dioceses or archdioceses in order to assist them in their rebuilding efforts. And usually they're going straight to the diocese or archdiocese. Likewise, our local Catholic charities will assist as they have funds available. So aside from that, I would say too that what we have seen just in the local area, probably the worst that we've seen in recent years for us was Hurricane Irma in 2017. That actually had us shut down here at our diocesan offices for about 4 days. And then some of the pastoral center staff with whom I work were without power for over a week. I would think with Fiona, you probably had it a lot worse, but that was the worst that we've actually seen it in recent years. Probably the worst storm that's impacted us directly.
Yeah, it certainly was. We've talked about this, like Deacon Sean and I mean, I'm not too afraid to admit. I don't think I've ever been scared during a storm before, but I was actually scared. I was actually frightened during this storm, especially on that Friday night. I can now say, that it's actually not true that I can sleep through anything because I was woken up by that storm on the Friday night. And I have never had the experience of being in a building that was actually shaking. My house was shaking here during some of and it was quite frightening because I didn't know what was going to happen. And like at one point, I went out on the back step with the flashlight, and it's just about 3 o'clock in the morning on Saturday morning. I was just kind of shining it around, looking to see if there's any damage. And then I thought, what am I doing here? Because there was stuff flying around and flying by, and I thought, oh my God, so it was, it was just, never mind spiritually, just kind of physically a frightening experience, to experience that. But I can't, Sean knows I can't help myself, and I kind of looked up when I was a kid. I used to hear people talking about here in Cape Breton and here in Nova Scotia talking about the August gale, and I think there were different ones. But I looked up, and there was it's a little bit before our time, but there was a very severe, probably the most. I don't know about Fiona, maybe the jury's still out, but up at that point, probably the most severe recorded storm that's ever hit this area, and it was August the 24th, 1873, a little bit before our time, but it blew up from New England, and we didn't get any warning here because the telegraph lines were all blown down in New England, so they had no way of communicating that this was coming our way. And the estimate, they don't have firm numbers, but the estimates vary that between 500 and 1,000 people died in that storm here in Nova Scotia in 1873. Mostly people on the sea, fishers. There were somewhere around 1,200 boats that were wrecked. Now in our area here, it says 37 boats were washed up on the Maurian sandbars. On Maurian sandbar, breakwaters and bridges were destroyed, and a new Presbyterian church in North Sydney was moved 50 feet off its foundation.
Wow!
By the wind.
Mhm.
And farmers reported that 150 millimeters of rain fell, during this. So, and then there were some other, so of course that during that hurricane season. So, but I think, Sean, I've been monopolizing a lot of music. I think this was certainly the worst storm I've ever seen here in my almost 60 years here on this earth. Yeah.
Yeah, my dad, who will be 86 in less than 2 weeks from today, actually. He'll
Oh,
be 86, and Mom will be 85. 2 years, 2 weeks and 1 day from today. So they're both mid-February birthdays. They both said they've never seen anything. They don't recall anything like this
Yeah.
in their lifetime. So
yeah.
yeah, it's. I don't know if we've ever seen anything like it, but unfortunately, if the folks that know a lot more about this than I do are to be believed, um, we're going to get it again.
Yeah.
Well,
So I
no
guess,
doubt with that, and I would ask too, there have been any
Go ahead.
movement in your diocese to perhaps put in place greater protections for parish properties as well? I don't know if that may have hastened that process a little bit.
yeah, I just got a wee bit of interference when you were asking the question, so I didn't quite. Just what about parish properties?
Well, I was just asking if anything has been put in place by your diocese for greater protection for parish properties, just knowing the damage, the potential for damage now, having gone
Sure.
through Hurricane Fiona.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a consideration, especially going forward for building and for um, just how we build things, how we put them together. I'm wondering, again, are standards going to change? What was up to code? At one point, is it we're going to have something a little more? One of the things, and one of the good things that, again, like as opposed to that August gale, that I mean, in our communities here, there was no loss of life. I don't think there were any like significant injuries. I think people were very prudent. I know here, the municipality, the Quebec Regional Municipality, that's where Glace Bay is part of, that they very early in this time they came on and they asked people to shelter in place, stay where you are. Uh, as long as where you are is safe, and if where you are is not safe, call right away, and we'll send somebody to help you. And I think that worked. So people sort of cooperated in that. And we had one thing was we had lots of warning that this was coming.
Uh-huh.
So we knew days beforehand that this was coming and that it was going to be bad. I'm not sure if other people were like me. I was hearing this, and this is coming. It's going to be bad. Um, I, I didn't realize how accurate that was, how accurate that was going to be, and that was the thing. Now, I guess we're priests and two deacons here, so I suppose somehow I suppose we have to ask, or at least address the spiritual side of all of this, and what I don't know what do we learn, what do we experience, spiritually. And I'll start with, like, for one thing, and I don't know how profound this observation is, but for one thing, it's certainly to me again is a lesson of what our place is actually here in the whole scheme of things, like how vulnerable we are. I think about all our technology. We're surrounded by all of these things. Technical this and internet that and this and that and the other thing. And I say, well, that all blew down in a night, and you know, so. But it's certainly. I think kind of puts things in perspective, kind of cuts us down to size as individuals, and how vulnerable and how fragile um, we are, and what and I think there's sort of a lesson in that, to remember our place when we get sort of too big for our britches, that
Mhm.
that we can be cut down to size pretty quickly
Mhm.
in the face of this. So I don't know. You guys maybe have some other sort of insights with that.
I've thought of that too in different circumstances, not just in the face of a storm, although that's, a very vivid reminder of that fact, but also when you hear about people who maybe one day are doing fairly well, keeping a roof over their head. Next thing you know, they're out of a job, they're on a downward slide, and then they're homeless. And how that can happen within such a short period of time. We've seen that, of course, with the economy here in the U.S. We've seen that for some as a result of the pandemic and how they found themselves out of work and eventually out of housing as well. One of the things we're dealing with here in the state of Florida right now is the rising incidence of homeless elderly. And that's become a real concern, trying to find affordable housing for elderly, because more and more are finding themselves really priced out of the market as rental prices continue to increase here in the state. And we find that even the idea of owning a home for some is just not even a consideration. So those are some things that are happening. A couple of scripture passages came to mind for me just in thinking about this whole discussion. The one comes from the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus says that God allows the sun to shine on the good and the evil, and also the rain to fall on the just and the unjust.
Yeah.
And I think we remember that we're all getting hit by this. It's not, God, what did I do? I must have been a bad person for this to happen. The other thing that comes to mind, and it's found actually in all four Gospels, is the story of Jesus calming the storm. That no matter what may have happened around us that we have no control over, Jesus can be the one to calm the storm from within. And I think we need to draw even more deeply into our faith. I had shared a story numerous times before about a gentleman who had lost his wife, and she left behind both her husband and 4 children. It was just a tremendous loss within a short period of time. She was actually pulling out into traffic, got hit on the driver's side, died instantly, but her 2-year-old daughter was in the back seat unharmed. So the husband and the 4 children at the funeral after communion stood up, and he decided to give a few words of remembrance about his wife. And he made a comment. He said, people have, in situations like this, wonder, how can a loving God allow something like this to happen? And he said, that's asking the wrong question. What you really should be asking is, where is God right now? And the answer to that question is, God is with those who are hurting. And I don't think there was a dry eye in that church that day. And just what a great witness of faith that he was holding on to that. And that was the one thing that was keeping him upright. And I think that those that have gone through loss, find that too. At the same time, it's amazing how it can pull a community together. We're seeing and continue to see that here in Florida with communities to the south of us in the Fort Myers area, Sanibel Island, Port Charlotte, that are still rebuilding. And it's amazing how people from nearby as well as out of state continue to pour in resources, give volunteer hours. And to me, that just really restores my faith in humanity and just seeing that.
Yeah. I think for me, a lot of like, where's God in this? It kind of reflects like what your image of God is. And I think if your image of God is an old man with a long white beard who sits up in the clouds and divvies out favors, yeah, you're not going to see that in the midst of all this. But if you see God as love, then it becomes a lot easier when you see neighbors sharing with neighbors. And sometimes it's simple as somebody has a generator, so they drop off a good cup of tea to those without power, or meals being shared. And there were so many stories of the line workers that were up from the States, that God bless them. They said this happened during our Thanksgiving, and they said if they got invited to one Thanksgiving meal, they got invited to 10, and just that outpouring of um, neighbor helping neighbor, it was just something to see and something to witness. And if that's your image of God, then God was really easy to see.
Yeah.
This just neighbor loving neighbor.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's one of the things too, that, it like this, this was certainly a trauma for people, but it brought out some of the best, the ways that people would reach out, and some of them quite simple but very important. And it's just as you said. I was talking with a lady, and there were people here, including Deacon Sean, who was many days without electricity.
12.
Yeah, so almost 2 weeks, right? So and all kinds of people like that, and it was kind of the phenomenon, of somebody like across the street would have power, but they didn't, and that kind of stuff, because Sean just lives one street over from me. And anyway, but this lady saying, well, every morning one of the neighbors, deposited a thermos of hot tea on the back step, and just to be able to do that. And people, all kinds of community organizations, churches, and others, those that sort of had generators and had power, had capacity to do that, opening their facilities, and preparing meals for people. There was a lady here in the community. She just kind of went on social media. She said, I have power, and come down to my house." And you say, well, this is you talk about like spirituality is God working through other people, and people sort of mediating really the love of God through what they do.
Mhm.
And of course, I don't think we have the monopoly on that, but Cape Bretoners, you're always going to find sort of the funny side of things, and that's including Deacon Sean, because I know you confided with me. I'm telling tales out of school
Oh,
now, but
oh.
you confided with me that after Fiona, and that your electricity was out, you said you weren't going to be able to go near your doctor for about 6 months, right? Because you cleaned out your freezer, and your diet was very interesting for several
We
days.
yeah, we decided that we were quite comfortable letting lettuce and celery rot, but there was no way we were going to lose any meat. So we were on for about a week. We were on a very high cholesterol diet. So yeah, if I was going for blood work, I think my doctor would have pronounced me dead. When you're having beef spare ribs for breakfast, it's probably not the healthiest of diets, but.
Well, I think you told me one day your breakfast was something like chicken wings, chicken nuggets, and bacon.
Bacon, yeah. Like we just
I don't know
were
why.
not willing to risk losing any of that.
I don't know why that just brings back memories to being a child growing up in Ohio, and we just happened to have a tornado hit close to where I was living at the time, and I can remember our power was out for about 36 hours. So as a kid, what did I do? I told my mom, we can't let this ice cream go to waste. The freezer's not working. We've got to do something about it. So
Yeah.
take
We
care
were
of a
just the
half
adult
gallon of ice
version of
cream in
that.
no time.
uh,
We just
so
did the
so
adult version of the ice cream, right?
Yeah.
so there you go, Rick. Then
While we
even
talk about storms, I should mention too, today is actually the last day of hurricane season
that's right.
here. And so hopefully we'll have a break. Now, sometimes that means absolutely nothing, because many years ago we had what was known as the no-name storm, which was in March. I don't remember the year. It's been a good 20 years or so, but I think about 1993. But it brought the same type of devastation as you would see with a hurricane, but just totally unexpected. But I would say, continue to pray for those. And I know if that's what we can do, that's powerful in itself. Continue to pray for those who have been through the storms. pray for neighbors to step up and to really show Christ to them by their presence. I think, if nothing else, sometimes those who are elderly and homebound might say, what use am I? You're of great use, because you can really bond with these people spiritually by doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I could say that too. And during the, just I'm glad you mentioned that, because I hadn't even thought of that. But during the pandemic too, I know that a lot of people were doing this. A lot of people were doing a sort of a phone ministry, and those were like sort of people who were normally not able to get out, elderly people, and doing that, reaching out to others, and that's right, because we're all part of that mystical body of Christ, so we all have we all have a place, and yeah.
Elaine McDonald commented here, and Rick, you don't know, Elaine lost her husband earlier this year, and she said, like, being alone, she wrote, being alone at that time was scary, but my neighbors helped me and kept checking in on me, right? So even something just as simple as that, right? Just, somebody's alone now that wasn't alone before, just reach out. How you doing? Cup of tea. Yeah. It makes such a huge difference.
It does, yes. And Father Dwayne, you were talking about during the pandemic, the parish where I serve did something very similar. And during that time, we actually had a seminarian who was with us on his pastoral year. Part of their formation includes 1 year where they're working full time in a parish. And this young man, who, God willing, will be ordained to the priesthood this next May, he was on the phone along with a couple of staff members making calls to parishioners. And there was an elderly woman who was almost moved to tears. And she said, I want to thank you for calling. You have no idea how much this means. I had never received a call from the parish before. And, that was wonderful on the one hand, but at the same time, that really was an eye opener for all of us to say, we really need to step up our efforts, because there are so many who feel like they're just out there, and nobody's aware of their existence, or nobody cares.
And this was a very large scale. This was a very big thing. But there are people that are living whatever, traumas sort of every day. Maybe we don't see it or don't know it because it's very localized and personal to them. And I guess the same thing kind of holds true. If we can, any of us, I guess, we can reach out and do that. I'm very happy, that Elaine made that comment, because it's something to realize, that there are people around us, and it's that prayer, right? God has no hands but yours, or feet but yours. I think it's that's part of our call, and just kind of the generosity of people, as Sean was mentioning, that we had all kinds of people who came from, well, the United States, and they came from other provinces here in Canada to come and help us, and get us back together. We had the army out. They were across the street from me, because there was the pole, the utility pole snapped in two across the street, and there were a bunch of trees down, and I was over talking to them, and these young soldiers, and again, it was one of these encounters that I had. I said, well, I was over talking to them. I don't know if it did them any good, but did me the world of good. Just kind of their attitude, and their cheerfulness, and that kind of thing. So, I think, well, it's one of these things is Saint Ignatius talked about, this Ignatius Loyola talked about, how important reflection is in our lives, right? And maybe just when we have a little bit of distance, a little bit of time, maybe it's good to kind of sit and reflect and say, well, what have I learned, and what have I learned about myself and God and the people around me, and that kind of thing. So
something in
anyway,
like that too, I often think about is after I've had a chance to kind of get over the initial shock, is what is the potential for good that can come from this, or what good can God bring in spite of what's happened? and trying to look at that. And sometimes I'll share that, and depending on the personality of the individual, they're either receptive to it or they're like, stop being so cheerful. Sometimes too, but at the same time, at least trying to plant that seed and say, there is something good that can come from this if you're open to that, and you're open to the work of God in all of this.
Yeah, and that's true, and that's the theological principle you learn. But it's these things I find as I get older. These things that I learned as principles, that I find that when I actually learned them, I really didn't understand what any of it meant. It's just kind of in living and seeing how people live and the faith of people, and their kind of love and dedication. But you learn this principle that God can draw good from evil, even from bad things. The grace of God can draw good things out, and you see how that can happen. Not that we want to go through bad things. That's not. But they're inevitable in life, and so how do we see that maybe, as you say, Deacon Rick, that what good can come from this, and what good has God drawn from this, and well, if you think even like Ignatius himself, from the misfortune, or what would you call it? The bad thing of getting wounded in battle. Well, that led him on a path, a very different path in his life, to becoming a priest and founding the Society of Jesus, and all he would never know at the moment that in doing that way down the road, 500 years later, the Society of Jesus would give us Pope Francis. So
right.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So,
yes.
Yeah.
And at the time I was in the Archdiocese of Ottawa, Archbishop Prendergast was their diocesan bishop at that time, was another Jesuit as well.
Awesome. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. So he often spoke too about the influence of the writings of Ignatius, as you can imagine. Yeah.
Yep. And Archbishop Prendergast, also a member of the Society of Jesus, and back in my days in the seminary at TSD, Toronto School of Theology, took a course in Pauline literature from Archbishop Prendergast, and I have to say, and I'm not trying to any brownie points or anything like that, it was an excellent scripture course. He was a great teacher. Yeah.
Yes. When I was at St. Paul University, he actually came on a couple of occasions to give talks, but one was about homiletics, actually, and what we can do to better incorporate scripture in homilies. So just brilliant, great teacher.
Yeah. Well, I think Deacon Sean, Deacon Rick, we're at the 33-minute mark, so I think we're sort of, I don't know, there's no time limit on us, but we sort of try to impose
we try not to torture people for longer than a half hour. Thanks for doing this, Rick. This was excellent. We'll have to have you back. See, now that you made the mistake of saying yes once, right? So now you're on our hit list. So
I think you're familiar with.
Pleasure. Yes.
Yeah.
I just wanted to share this, and hoping I'm not rubbing salt in the wound or anything like that. But and I did have to do my quick conversion on my phone because I had forgotten for a moment how to convert Fahrenheit to Celsius. But right now it's about 27 Celsius here.
You're killing
you are torturing us.
Yeah. We're at about 33 Fahrenheit right now. So
yeah, that's right. It's about 0 or 1 degree here,
Yeah,
So that's the well, of course, and I had a granduncle, my grandmother's brother, And of course, most of the people here, most of us have a lot of Scottish blood in us. That their ancestors came from Scotland. And my granduncle used to say, I remember that when I was a kid. He said, "Why didn't that old Scotsman go to Florida?" Uh,
Yeah.
so that's it. Anyhow.
It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and I hope that maybe in some way this has been a blessing to anyone who's been watching. And I guess that it's going to be made available too for those that want to
Well,
watch it another time.
we'll send you the link too. When we
That's right. And you too may torture the people in your diocese. So that's
I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. Well, thanks. Thanks to everyone who's with us or who's going to watch. And we're as you see, we're maybe infrequent, and maybe that's how some people like us in small doses. But thank you for being with us. And as I just want to echo what Deacon Shaw said, thank you so much, Deacon Rick, for being with us. And I'd say your diocese is very blessed in having you as their chancellor. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for loaning Father Bernie to us in the winter months. People here absolutely love him. He's been here for more than 20 years and has made a lot of friends. He's just a lovely man.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised at that, hearing that. So anyway, so thanks everyone, and take care, and God bless you all, and pray for us, and we'll do the same. So,
all right.
Bye.
everyone.
God bless you in your ministry.